Now to make our kiwi wine, we will be using the following. I have 5 pounds of fresh kiwis. I have 4 cups or just under 1 liter of white granulated sugar. This may change. You may add more. I might add less. I'll know later on. I'll need a packet of regular bread yeast, or 1 teaspoon if that's what you got. I'll be using the juice of 1/4 of a lemon. I'll be using a couple of straining bags. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. There are ways around it. I'll need a gallon of clean filtered water. I'll need a wide mouth fermenter or any other suitable wide mouth container, something with a nice big opening that you can actually get stuff into. I'll need a secondary carboy jug, demijohn, or in this particular case, recycled apple juice jug. You'll need an airlock with bung for your primary fermenter and your secondary carboy. This particular airlock with bung has a number 6 bung, and the bung is just that little rubber stopper at the end of the airlock. You'll need an 8-quart pot with tight-fitting lid. It would be helpful if you had a hydrometer with testing tube to let us know how much starting sugar we're starting our wine with, and we'll compare that at the end with the amount of sugar left over to calculate our alcohol by volume. Also to help us to determine if there are any problems with a stalled or stuck fermentation. Of course, as always, we want to make sure all of our equipment has been properly cleaned and sanitized using either one-step, star sand, or any other suitable method for sanitizing, cleaning your equipment. And this is what we're going to be using to make this wine. Okay, the game plan is going to be really very simple. We want to cut our kiwis in half. We want to scoop them out. The best you can. Again, but once we want to go ahead and give them a rough chop. And we want to go ahead and get those in a straining bag. And repeat the process. Those hands like to hang on around the ends. Cut them off. Rough chop. Scoop them up. And into the bags. And repeat the process for the rest of them. Now, occasionally you're going to run across one that's a bit on the soft side until it's discoloration, as opposed to what a regular one should look like. Well, these are pretty much overripe. Rule of thumb, if you don't want to eat it, don't put it in your wine. So we'll just set that one aside and move on to the next one. All right, tie off my straining bags here. All right, let's move on. Now that we've got our pot on the stove, let's go ahead and pour in roughly half of our water. I mean, there's no need to be precise. We're going to use it all eventually, well, most of it eventually. Put a lid back on. And let's bring this up to a boil. With our water now having come to a vigorous boil, we can go ahead and turn off the heat. We're done with that. Next thing we want to do is we want to take about a half a teaspoon of our bread yeast. Let's go ahead and dump that in. If you've not seen this channel before, you probably are not aware that dead bread yeast cells will act as a yeast nutrient to live yeast cells. So that's the purpose of putting in the yeast at that point. Next thing we want to do, since the water is nice and hot, we want to go ahead and pour in our sugar. And go ahead and incorporate that. All right. Following that is go ahead and drop in our kiwi. Now, the whole purpose of doing that is that since this channel does not use sulfites, boiling water is a good way to kill off any wild yeast that might have clinged to the fruit, and to some degree, any harmful bacteria. That being the case, we're going to put our lid back on, and we can now let this come down to room temperature. Let's go ahead and transfer our juice from our pot to our fermenter. First thing I want to do is that I want to remove the fruit bags for a moment. Let them drain a bit. Set those aside. Take the lid off our fermenter. And pour the juice into our freshly sanitized fermenter. The reason why we took the bags out is because the fermenter does have marks indicating various quantities, in my case, a gallon. And I want at least a gallon of wine so to accurately, or more or less, measure how much liquid I'm going to need. Take the bags out because of the volume of the bags, throwing off the readings. Once I've gotten my 1 gallon measure, go ahead and put our bags back in, along with any juice that might have escaped. For the moment, put our lid back on while we get the lemon ready. All right, let's go ahead and get our 1/4 of a lemon ready, which again is acting as our acid blend substitute. And if you've got a strainer handy, that might be useful because we don't want to get any seeds in our wine. All right, let's go ahead and take our lid off. And let's go ahead and squeeze in our juice. Ooh, it's a juicy one. Yeah. Again, plenty of seeds we don't want to get in our wine because it might cause bitterness. Good enough. Put the lid back off for a moment. And now that I've got my spoon in hand, we can go ahead and give that a light stir. There are some who say you should be using a plastic spoon to stir up a plastic container, and they are correct. But this spoon was handy, so that's the one I'm using. Okay, let's go ahead and take that initial hydrometer reading for those of you with hydrometers. Now, this is not going to be an exact reading because we still have all of that kiwi fruit, which is still holding on to a lot of its sugars. However, looks like that initial reading is going to come in at 1.122. Now, to begin the process of turning our juice into wine, we of course need to add in our yeast. Again, half a teaspoon of regular bread yeast, trying to sprinkle it around as evenly as possible. Go ahead and put our lid back on. And what basically is going to begin to happen is that the yeast is going to begin consuming the sugars, the oxygen, and in the process creating alcohol and CO2. Now, the CO2 has got to have a way to get out of the container because you don't want it to basically explode or whatever. So for that, you need an airlock. This particular fermenter has its own built-in airlock, which is a little red dot there. As you press it, it basically raises up and releases CO2. If your fermenter does not have a built-in airlock, then you're going to need one of these or something similar to it. Or some other method, loose cap, balloon, cloth, whatever you want to take your chances with. But basically, you're going to need a way of releasing the CO2 as it builds up over time. Now, in order to keep track of what, when, and how much information we need for creation, we're going to label it as such. We are making a Kiwi wine. We started it on this date, and that's usually the date I add the yeast, in which case that's when the whole process of turning juice into wine begins. And our original gravity or starting gravity was 1.122. Now, this starts the process, but over the course of the next several months, there are a couple of things that we're going to need to do. We're going to need to periodically rack it, that is transferring it from one fermenter to another, primarily to get it off any dead leaves that might be settling on the bottom of the container that might possibly give it off flavors. Once the process has been completed entirely, we're going to go through the process of just degassing it in case it's necessary to remove any CO2 that hasn't been released. We're going to back sweeten it if necessary, which is the process of adding sugar to sweeten it to our personal liking. We're then going to bottle it. We're going to pasteurize it. That is to kill off any remaining yeast that might begin to revive after we've given it additional sugar during the back sweetening process. We're then going to cork it, label it, and at some point in time, we're going to consume it. In my case, that's going to be 12 months from now. You'll see the second half of this video where we do the 12-month taste testing. So until then, I'll see you in the next video. Well, we've let this one age just a little bit longer. It's been about 13 months since we first started making this Kiwi wine. There was a delay in getting this done, but nonetheless, here it is. All right, what do we got? Kiwi wine, born 11/20/2023. ABV came in at 17.33%. All right, it's been back sweetened. It was back sweetened and it's been pasteurized. All right. For those you who might be somewhat new to this video and the purpose, I pasteurize my wines when necessary to stop fermentation that might reoccur once the wine's been back sweetened. And back sweetening is just the process of adding in sugar at the end to bring it to the desired sweetness level that you prefer. However, that has a tendency to start the yeast munching on the additional sugar, hence re-fermentation, hence pasteurization, to stop everything from going on. All right, that being said, let's see. This one was another hazy wine. Just as an aside, for those of you who saw my last video on that lime wine that I made, I have to admit that was pretty good. I just finished the last bottle earlier today, and apart from toning down the amount of lime juice, that particular batch of wine definitely stood up to ice. In fact, that was how I was drinking it, with ice. Howard, this is Kiwi, not lying. Small glass here because it being December 25th, it means that there are two football games going on right now. I want to watch one of them. All right. Not that Kiwi has much of an aroma to begin with, so you really can't smell much of anything except the alcohol, which again, don't know how it got up to 17.33%, but ran the calculations online using one of the online ABV calculators, and that's the number it gave me. All right. All right, it has sort of a peach flavor to it, a bit of brightness at the end, but yeah, sort of like peachy, kind of. It's good. Although it's 17.33%, have to drink in moderation, but yeah, this is not bad. Yeah, I like this. Kiwis aren't all that expensive. Next time I make a batch of lime wine, and that's one of the ones, yeah, I'm definitely going to be making another batch of later on. I might grab some kiwis and make a kiwi wine. Damn, it is good. Okay, uh, let's wrap this up. This is my last batch of unbottled wine that I made for the channel. And that was the honeydew melon wine. I've definitely got to bottle that and go through the whole back sweetening, pasteurization, bottling, corking, labeling, capping, if necessary, process. And I just ain't ready for that. Do that one later. Okay, that being said, I'll see you in the next video.